Good evening and welcome to ACS Industry Insights, where we're interviewing some of Australia's biggest technology leaders and looking at those game-changing ideas that can be enabled by technology. I'm Andrew Johnson, CEO of ACS. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. As is always the case with Industry Insights, please send your questions through at any time using the chat function and we'll get through as many of those as possible. Now, I'm really excited by tonight's guest. There is, again, no bigger CV in Australian technology than our special guest tonight. More than 20 years working with IBM, including as CEO of IBM in Australia and New Zealand, former CEO of Telstra, current chairman of CSIRO and Data61, as well as board director for some of the great fintechs in Australia, such as Tyro Payments and Xero. Gives me great pleasure to introduce you to David Thodey. Welcome, David.
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, really good to see you.
David, I only touched on really a quarter of the CV. You've really been driving some of the big brands in terms of emerging technology in Australia. What's got your attention now?
Oh, gee, Andrew, that's a good question. I mean, today or over the last week. Look, at the moment, just in terms of what I'm doing, I'm obviously very involved in tech and, tech companies, technology and science and research, just how we can really drive that to really impact the economy. But at the moment, I'm involved in this National COVID Commission of the Prime Minister, where we're giving advice in terms of just how we recover. And that's taking up quite a bit of time. And then for the boards, I'm doing quite a bit of time around just closing out the year. And then I'm not quite sure how I ended up doing this, Andrew, but I'm also been looking at federal financial relations and the relationship between the states and the Commonwealth and how the money flows, which has not been a core competence of mine, but it's been a review that I've actually really enjoyed doing. So yeah, so that's what's taking my time at the moment, and it's I do a lot of Zoom meetings or Skype meetings like all of us at the moment.
What about if we just focused on CSIRO for a second and the convergence between science and technology? What's the team working on that has you most excited about where technology can take us?
Yeah, that's a big question, Andrew, because one of the things about the incredible people at CSIRO, there's such a diversity of things that are going on. But maybe I could talk about a few. I mean, as you know, CSIRO has 8 or 9 different divisions, and we go from the square kilometre array, where we own, the country owns 1 million hectares across near Murchison in the west, and we've got 36 dishes, and we're looking at the origins of the universe. So we've got all that, and then we've got go all the way through, agriculture, marine science, oceans and atmosphere, etc., all through that. But what they do is they have about 6 or 7 areas which they call their future science platforms. CSIRO is around it does pure science but applied science, about how science and research makes a difference in the economy. And these future science platforms, I always find them incredibly interesting. So I'll take you through a few of them. One is the Deep Earth Imaging project we've got. And of course, I was just talking around space and, the origins of the universe, but also the team are using big data to try to, provide images of the Earth. So for example, you go up to Karratha, rather than you put on your, I know Google goggles aren't quite as popular as they used to be, but put your Google goggles on and you look down and you can actually see the stratification of all the different mineral deposits, because what you've got are taking all the seismic data and sort of mashing it up and then doing visualization on it. And so, all that data exists, but pulling it all together is really hard. So that's an incredible project, still in its early days. We're doing quite a bit on what we call probing biosystems, which is about how we can get real-time data in real time from biological environments and then give true sort of feedback. I mean, in a way, it could be this you know, sweatshirt or jersey I've got on, reporting back, all my vital statistics. It's that sort of thing. And then we go through to obviously doing a lot in environomics, which is sort of how you digitally enable our monitoring of the environment, agriculture, cropping, cotton through to wheat to bran. It's just amazing. I mean, those are things that get me really excited. And of course, everything is driven by data. That's the incredible thing. And more and more our scientists, the old labs, I mean, we still need a few labs, but they're not really, we used to design one scientist for one lab. It's now completely different because so much is virtualized using big data, algorithms, etc. So, I mean, we could be talking AI, ML, and automation, but these are the real applications. So, CSIRO will be completely different over the next 5 to 10 years in terms of how it does its work. It's amazing. I could keep going a long time. I mean, and of course we're doing all the work on synthetic biology, which is just amazing, and we're involved in the gene editing process. We're also involved in, quite a bit of the work around, hydrogen and how, we think hydrogen is obviously an incredibly important fuel going forward, and how do you manufacture it, how do you distribute it, how do you build? So, yeah, well, but it's all those wonderful scientists, nothing to do with me, just all the scientists.
So if you were to look back at all that groundbreaking technology over 40 years, our audience is primarily technologists and IT professionals. What would be your key tips for how do you lead successfully that technological change?
Oh, gee. Well, look, I mean, there's sort of two parts to it, isn't there? I mean, one is just how you approach life and leadership, and having a hunger for, for learning and being willing to sort of step into new technologies. And I think what that requires for all of us is, that hunger for knowledge, constant learning, but it does take a lot of resilience. I would say, there's been times in my career where I've not really known quite which is the right way to go, but you just stay the course, and as long as you believe in it, you're getting satisfaction, you come out the other end. But then you've got on the other side, you've got to invest in being good at whatever you do. I mean, I started as an engineer. I was an assembler programmer. Most of the people here probably know what an assembler program is. But that's where I started, and I built my capability there, and then then I went into systems engineering. So you want to have deep domain knowledge in the area, and then you got to have your leadership skills, and then step forward. Find opportunities to, step into, and there's always a bit of risk. You might not do so well, but if you do that, it's amazing how your career goes. And and there's times when you think, oh, I don't know, maybe there isn't opportunities, but there's always something to do, and just make yourself available. And then people see that attitude and they say, yeah, we'll give that guy a go. So,
you mentioned in one of your earlier responses about, data is the new fuel, and getting real-time access to data is really important for new business models. If we were to consider platform dynamics and the Australian economy, innovation, new product development, how would you describe the differences between how traditional corporate approaches platform dynamics compared to someone like Xero or Tyro?
Yeah, well, look, I've got to say that it is quite different. And I, platform economics are just radically different in how you look at the problem, how you define it, and then the solutions you build. And because you don't start taking this sort of vertically integrated. I mean, when I was writing systems, it was, the database, the logic and the UI were all sort of vertically integrated. And now it's sort of this horizontal, the data is sort of a horizontal layer, the logic is a horizontal layer, and then the UI. And so you approach things differently. And then with cloud dynamics and, the scalability and on demand, it suddenly sort of creates, immediately you go to a global market, because you're looking at, that's exactly what Xero does, built, accounting software on a scalable platform. Yes, you've got to do some customization in country, and Tyro to some extent. So it is radically different, and you look at how you run a business differently because you can't run it in these big hierarchical organizations. I mean, Telstra used to have, I think every year, I think it'd be 13 layers of management and would say, oh, that's ridiculous. Let's get it down to 9. Then you sort of have this cleansing process. Then you go back the next year and there'll be 13 again. You go, what happened? But, sort of, because that just doesn't work. It's, command and control. You've got to really flip it and get people engaged in building solutions across the organization. So, we all talk around agile and network organizations, but it's more than that. It's really how you can bring the discretionary capability and energy and passion of people together to solve problems for customers using technology. That's what is so inspiring and exciting. Yeah.
What about 5 years ago, design thinking was the next new big thing.
Yeah.
Used very much for new product design, but from a board director's perspective, how do you sort of measure and monitor and look at the risks associated with new product development in what is otherwise, unregulated markets? People don't need to buy your product or service. How can you feel comfortable about getting uptake of any investment that you make?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we care deeply about the returns for sure. Look, coming back to design thinking, look, I think, firstly, product development and innovation. I'm going to put innovation in there too, because really good product is about innovation and how you can build it faster, but actually make a difference for the end user, whoever's going to be using it. Design thinking is just part of it because design thinking starts with the end user. It starts creating that brilliant experience. And we've all, bought our iPhones and, it's just, isn't it a wonderful feeling, even just opening that iPhone box and there's just that right amount of resistance and it pops out and then there it is. You've got to give it to them. They are brilliant. And that's all design thinking. And it's the attention to detail. It's the attention to, well, even now, finally fixing when you buy the wired, not that many people have wired earphones now, but they've now, designed them so you can open them easily, But it's getting attention to detail and making it a brilliant experience. That's what design thinking is with the customer, I think. So if you put that back into product development, you need both that, good disciplined technologists, and you need to drive the best out of it, but you need people who are there who are thinking about, well, how's this experience going to really delight the customer or make a difference? That's one of the things we say at Xero, beautiful software. We never used to talk around beautiful software before, but it's a great experience. And so there is this very tactile human element to the products we develop. And I think, that's what I really, there's lots of people I've admired over the years, but those people who have really used technology but changed the way the world worked or changed the way I did something, or, it can be simple. It can be the way you design a screen, for people interacting. I think it's great. So design thinking is really important. So how does a board look at that? Well, boards are funny things, Andrew. We look at broad brush things and we get less and less expert at anything. But boards, I think as a board, you're looking for the output. You're looking for the people who talk about these things in a passionate way, but are really capable of what they're doing. So you're looking at the culture of the organization, and then you're looking at outcomes. What are they delivering, and the time at which you're delivering, because the world moves fast and business is tough, especially in a COVID world. We really need to be more innovative and drive things harder. So I hope that sort of gives you a bit of a sense. But very much it's very, very, very sort of front and center. And of course, agile sort of picks up elements of that, but it's and doing it at scale is hard. But it's about outcomes driven and design thinking. Yeah.
Now, I can certainly relate to the iPhone box popping. My kids love it. Can't get too many.
Yes, right.
Cost me a fortune.
That's right. They are expensive. Hey, but I mean, I don't. But you know, pricing for value. If you get value from it, well, great. But they are expensive. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah.
You talked about the current economic climate for our tech entrepreneurs who have
Yeah.
tuned in tonight. How would you
Yeah.
describe the current landscape and any tips for how to access capital in this downturn climate?
Right. Well, look, obviously, it's a tougher environment, so I feel for people. It's probably very early stage where there just hasn't been a lot of real seed capital around. But I've got to say, I mean, I'm involved at Square Peg Capital. I'm involved a bit at Airtree and of course Main Sequence Ventures, which is a part of the CSIRO fund, which is now a couple of $100 million. We're still investing, so there is money there. Um, and the superannuation funds are still allocating funds into the venture capital end. Where it's sort of been a bit harder is sort of the early stage, seed capital. But I think that, look, if you've got a good idea, I reckon you can find money. It's not as much around as there was, probably. But I look back 6 years ago at the venture capital world, and there's more around still today than there was 6 years ago. Um, so, but is there a need for more? Of course there is, and I hope that we can try to free some up as we go through the next months. But it's it's about prioritization at the moment, Andrew. We've got to get look after the biggest sector has been the retail, accommodation, tourism, and they're really hurting. And so it's just going to be a prioritization as we work through that. And so for any tech out there, if you've got a great idea, stay the course as much as you can, and keep talking to people, because I think good ideas will get funding.
So not just tech, but more broadly, new firms, if there's a decline in new firms, that generally means bad news for new job creation. Yeah. What are the public policy levers available that might help stimulate new firms entering markets?
Right. Well, I mean, just to give you some sense, of the numbers we're talking about. So at the moment, we've got over 5 million people at the moment, on some sort of government support. I think the numbers are about 3.5 million on JobKeeper, 1.5 million on JobSeeker. And when we look at small and medium business, there's probably 25-30% of small businesses that are not trading. Now, we don't know whether they're going to come back or not. So there's been a lot of businesses just sort of in hibernation, and of course some of those are not going to come out. But one thing we learned from the GFC is that once you get through this, actually the number of new businesses actually accelerates, because people are pretty dynamic and pretty creative. I mean, coming back to design thinking, I actually do have an incredible confidence in the innovative and entrepreneurial capability of people. Now, it takes time to get that through. So the question is, how do you help businesses, new businesses start up? So first of all, we want to get the ones that can get back into the market, and that's why JobKeeper, the government-backed loan, which has not been a bestseller, but I think there is some extra work we need to do there. That'll help people survive, but there will be some businesses that are going to have to say, look, we just can't get through it, and we'll have to help them as well. But we also need to look at the new industries, and we've been doing a lot of work about, our economy, thankfully, is very strong in resources, strong in ag, has had quite a strong education, but we've got to build this knowledge-based economy. And that is across, tech, but it's also in healthcare, be it med tech, pharma tech, all those sort of areas. And if we can start to build new innovative businesses there, and I think that's what we're looking at. We'll probably talk, come back to talk about advanced manufacturing, because we need to completely reskill people too through that process. But everything needs technology, digital enablement underneath it. And so we've got to do that. Now, how we do that at scale is always the challenge, because We've got to get skills out there, and then we're going to have to continue with some of the things we've done. Like, I think some of these tech precincts have been good. Even I was involved in, the the one in York Street here in Sydney. And, it was really great. But at the moment, there's not many people there. But I think we need to regenerate that. I mean, I'm delighted to see Atlassian are going to build that great big new building, wooden building around Central. And now we've got the whole Central Tech. And I think that'll take it, be exciting. I see the Quantum Computing Academies starting up there. UTS have put more money behind tech. So there's quite a bit going on in the background. We just need to capture that and stay the course, because it's just, COVID, we will go get through COVID. It's just time we need. And so I really encourage people to stay the course. I know it's not easy, but we've got to work through this. Yeah, in my view.
When we first sort of had restrictions coming into play, we could see some of our global supply chains did actually fall over, particularly in health products that needed for hospitals and the like. A lot has been made since around sovereign capability and building domestic capability. Just at a high level, how much of that is real, do you think, going forward? And if we do need to build sovereign capability, what specific areas? Because price point's always going to be a challenge.
Yeah. Well, look, I'm not sure there's an easy answer to this. Look, we do need to look at what in our supply chain is essential, and then what are the risks in those supply chains, and then we've got to look at what are the mitigants against them. Now, I'm not sure. Let's take, we'll take rubber gloves. Not that that's it's a bit of a worn one in many ways. Look, I will never produce rubber gloves at the same price as the Chinese, but we can build alternate capability and differentiated product, in Australia. And what it really does get back to is agile manufacturing and, sort of this advanced manufacturing where we can retool. And actually, you look at what a lot of these companies have done, the ones who are building masks, they've retooled existing supply chains. So I'm not sure that we should go out and just build manufacturing capability that sits there idle. What we need to do is build, manufacturing production capability that's agile enough to switch and to know where it is and do the planning on that. The actual vaccine itself and production capability there, that's going to be a slightly different one. And it's very hard to know how that's going to play out because, one, we've got to determine what's the right vaccine. And then there's going to be, as you can see, the US is spending a lot of money, as is Europe, trying to, grab supplies. So, but we are already thinking about what capability we need here in Australia to cater for the different options that there are. So I'm not convinced that we should just build capability and say, wait till another disaster, but building agile, advanced, smart, innovative manufacturing capability is really what we need to do. Yeah.
And what about, do you have any specific insights of where do you see the advanced manufacturing opportunities might be for Australia? Where are the gaps in the market that we could add value?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, this one, is because for those who don't know, there was the Andrew Liveris report on advanced manufacturing. There was, which went to the Prime Minister, and there was quite a bit of media about that. Look, it just depends. You see, I think of advanced manufacturing, as sort of more a horizontal capability. I don't think of it as a specific vertical. So, so if I'm thinking about, food, we want advanced manufacturing capability in all our food production so we can add value, be it, avocado paste that doesn't have any preservatives in it, but can last for, 5 months, and that's an incredibly clever manufacturing capability. I was out at Armidale recently looking at a company that builds, when you go to motor camps, those cabins, builds those. And this is an Armidale, this huge manufacturing, all done, through advanced manufacturing using laser technology they've completely re-engineered the supply chain process and design, and they don't just build one off; they're building in parallel using laser technology. Absolutely amazing. That's advanced manufacturing. Or if I think around, some of the work, I was out at Western Sydney, where this firm that builds these little what do they call that? On motorways that sort of report back. It's an IoT application, report back on traffic volumes. It doesn't touch a thing. It just, they flick a switch and off they go, and they can't make enough around the world. I mean, it's amazing technology. So I'm not. I think it's finding our existing manufacturing base, equipping them with digital tools, and that's obviously AI, ML, automation, robotics, etc. Now, are there sort of new areas? Well, I do think in pharma tech, there's sort of some really special areas. Med tech, we've got to work out how we get regulatory approvals quickly done. That's a bit of a challenge. But it's those sorts of areas of really high-end scale. And that's why Cochlear is a great example of where we've been able to do some really advanced, high-tech, advanced manufacturing capability. But even, you can use advanced manufacturing techniques, in fertilizer production, or so it's very pervasive, and so I'm a little bit worried that some people think advanced manufacturing is this sort of new sector that's suddenly going to pop out. It's not. It's about enabling, this whole new world out there.
David, what about the public sector? It's had a little bit of press in more recent times whether pay rises should go through and the like, but the reality is across all three tiers of government, public sector spending is about a third of GDP.
Yeah.
To what extent should public sector spending be used as a lever in an economic downturn?
Oh, look, I think you should use it. I mean, there's no question about it. That isn't saying that we should be inefficient or, irresponsible. Look, I have enormous admiration for the public service. I mean, I try not to call it the bureaucracy because I just think it's derogatory. I actually, some really capable, good people work in the public service, and one of the great tragedies in Australia is that we score very poorly, as you know, on collaboration in Australia, and when I use collaboration in this sense around the innovative, this is academics working with public servants and working in the private sector. The actual movement of people between those different sectors is very, very low. So, I mean, I don't know how many people on the call tonight, but if I ask, how many have worked in, if they're in public sector, how many have worked in private sector, we don't have this sort of porosity, porous walls of working, people moving across public sector and private sector. So I have a lot of admiration, but I think we can do better than what we're doing. I'm not sure we're seeing the public sector as a source of enormous innovation and technology, but we should be using them, to really be at the forefront of some of the technology. Though I will say, there are some really good applications. I don't know, have you ever looked at single touch payroll for small business, which is just the ability, I mean, this is an incredible innovation from the tax office around, basically it's PAYE payment and with staff. It's all automated. It's just incredibly efficient, and it's it's encouraging, or it is forcing small businesses to digitally enable so they can, interact with the post office, with the ATO. So I think that we should use the public service as a source of innovation. I think we should always ask for a good return on our taxes, in terms of where they go. But I would also say I think that we've had a few goes at trying to really technically enable, the public service. I think that at least in Canberra, the Digital Transformation Agency is doing some good work. I think New South Wales is doing some really exciting work under Domino and Service New South Wales. There's some real, I know I went in to get my driver's license, Service New South Wales the other day, and so it was just like that, so it was really great service, but it was all technology enabled. And now have you got your electronic driver's license yet?
No, I haven't, but
You should. I mean, that's a world one of the world leading. So I think that's where we need to be innovative. 3 layers of government. You know, look, our one. Well, let's talk to federation first. Well, federation's it's pretty good. It's not ideal, but it always needs to be tidied up. And the responsibility of education and health, clarity of boundaries needs a little bit of work. But remember, there's this under our federation. There is the whole principle of subsidiarity. Which is that the work should be done as close to the community as possible. So look, I'm not sure you can get away with anything but 3 levels, because local government does certain things. In a country the size of Australia, you can't have someone sitting in Sydney trying to tell someone in Karratha what to do. That ain't going to work for a lot of different reasons, or in the territory. And then the question is, what does the Commonwealth, how do we leverage a centralised model? So, we're not too bad. Did you know? Here's something. Do you think we're a high tax-paying country? Do you think we have very high taxes in Australia? This is a question to you.
Oh, well, I certainly feel so.
Well, the truth is that if you look at tax to GDP, we're in the bottom 10% of OECD. However, we have very high income tax, and we're one of the highest corporate taxes in the OECD. But what we don't do is our consumption tax is very low. We're one of the lowest consumption taxes in the world. So our tax mix is sort of all a bit skew-if. But actually our overall tax or government expenditure to GDP is actually not too bad. So most people don't know that, which is interesting, isn't it? Because we all look at our income tax and say, oh, I pay too much tax. I think that too as well.
Well, I did know that income tax was about double the corporate company tax rate in terms of revenue receipts. But in terms of the public sector employees, how important or what role can public sector employment play for technology transfer throughout the rest of the economy, as well as knowledge transfer? And then to what degree do you balance insourcing and outsourcing when you build tech? So yes, tech enables in the provision of public services, but what about building those new bespoke technologies that you're talking about, like the one push payroll that ATO has? Well,
look, I feel very strongly that the public service should be really the forefront, not bleeding edge, but the forefront of technology adoption and innovation. I think that they spend a lot of money because they're providing a service to citizens, and it should be a really exciting place to work, etc. Now, unfortunately, I think the problem that we get into is that there's a couple of ways about how finance look at expenditure. They don't have the same concept of capital and operating costs. It's all cash, so it becomes a difficult trade-off in the funding of these big projects. But there has been some progress there. But I think the government, state and federal, should be playing a critical role. I think it should be a great place of learning, and I'd love to see more people from industry going in and out of the public service and public service working in industry. I think we'd get a better mix, because people tend to get a bit caught in there. And then we've got to sort of move away from these very large, complex projects. By the way, I've done enough of them in my career, of new billing systems at Telstra. And no, you can't ask me about any billing problems, because I can't help. But they're just too big. So you've got to be able to get them down to bite-sized bits, and you've got to use platform. Back to our conversation on platform dynamics, because that's a very different way of writing big complex systems. And unfortunately, there's so much legacy often in the public service. Old green. Look at DHS. They've got some of those benefits that are, some of those applications go back 20, 30 years. So you've also got to be able to like in business, you got to kill some products to, to be able to build the new. And unfortunately, politically, that's difficult. I know because, it might be a benefit system for, I don't know, a vet, but you can migrate people, but you just need to be really planned. It's like migrating people off different mobile plans. It's hard, but you can do it. So you've got to have a reformist view. You got to look at the end user and then really innovate with technology, and then take on these projects that are exciting. So young, technologists say, "Hey, that's great. I can really get in there and do some exciting things." Do that, then we'll go. Be exciting, brilliant. Yeah.
What about your observations in the here and now of today? What are the core digital capabilities that small businesses will need in order to be successful in the next 12 to 24 months?
Well, know how to use Zoom and a bit of e-commerce is pretty good, isn't it? Oh, look, I mean, as small business is such a diverse, different. So you're talking from, a person who's running the local cafe through to, quite complex, foreign exchange systems. So, look, but everybody, you gotta be digitally competent. You don't need to know everything. You got to have a digital awareness. Unfortunately, these days, you need to know about cybersecurity because, we're all subject to either phishing or, malware or, attacks on your data. And so you've got to understand the reality of that. And I think that's why the government's really staring into that at the moment. But what I'm really excited about is how we can build more efficient ecosystems. So let me take an example. So import export, agriculture. I mean, there's so much paperwork still in that system, and you just think about, from the grower through to the buyer, through the distributor, the trucking company, to the containerization, to the, maybe it's freight, maybe it's air freight, to landing, to taxes. It's just, there's so much stuff. We need to be building these very smart digitally enabled ecosystems, and that's what platform dynamics can really make a difference. And you could talk to panel beaters through to builders, and already you see really good builders who are linked into the architect. Then when the architect does his bill of what's it called, all the supplies you need to do, it's all linked through, and bang, then you got your project plan. There's so much opportunity to grow productivity and innovation in these systems, and that's where we need to get to. And I think government can facilitate some of that, but we need industry to step up as well. And that's what industry associations should be doing, is how they enable those, because that really does make a difference. Better outcome for citizens at lower cost and a more competitive Australia. That's what we want.
I've got lots of questions coming in from our audience, so I'm just going to ask one more before I throw over to the audience. So Australia's lost about 1 million jobs since the end of March. We had a workforce of 13 million, now it's about 12 million. And a lot of energy resources have gone into JobSeeker and JobKeeper, and the recent announcements around Job Trainer. A lot of the education and training investment seems to focus on displaced workers, trying to move those workers into employment. But in an environment where there's a downturn, we have the 12 million workforce still at risk. If businesses aren't generating enough revenue, you can certainly see more right-sizing, downsizing occurring in the next 6-12 months. How do we focus on lifting the productivity and efficiency of the existing workforce and existing industries so that we don't leak more jobs and we can start to focus on the creation aspects?
Yeah. Well, I don't know again if I've got a magic answer to that one, but look, firstly, I mean, what most companies that I'm involved in doing is we've got a real commitment to our people. We're looking at what we need to do to right size, and yes, in some instances we're losing people, but we're looking after them as we go through that process. But you've got to make sure that you have a business that is sustainable and it's going to employ the core number. And so you've got to right size, you've got to digitally enable, and technology is right at the heart of that, right through, I mean, at Ramsay Healthcare, we've been, fortunate enough, we've had a lot of, we haven't really lost any people, but we're still looking at how we can be more efficient in, looking after patients and, managing the information flow. But then at a national level, we've got, as people come out, we've got to be able to find, either reskill them or get them into the new industries. So there is a lot of work going into, well, where are these new industries? How can we create them and create a demand, a pull through of people into these things? Because look, the truth is that there will be a lot of more downsizing going forward. I mean, that's just inevitable. However, I will say, the opportunities, for people to start their own business. If you think around, don't want to say it's the gig economy, but I do think that for all of us, I think we need to think about running, that we ourselves are our business, and how do we step in and how can we employ others to deliver a service going forward. So I'm not sure that, that all the jobs are going to be in big corporate Australia. I think it's going to be quite different, but there is, enormous sort of new. I mean, look at, well, if I said cybersecurity, I mean, there's a whole lot of jobs going there, I tell you. So that's going to be another, but there'll be other new opportunities that go through. So I'm really pleased to be in the tech sector. I mean, I think that what our sector at the moment is about 6% of GDP in terms of technology. By the way, most European countries up around 9%. I think we employ around about 5.5% of all employees. I think we can, the demand is probably going to go up. So I think the tech sector is a great place to be. Still great job opportunities. I think healthcare, social services, I think you'll see a change in the value we put on to those human services. And I think there'll be more opportunity for people to do those going forward, and I think that's great. I mean, remember, we've got an aging population like you and me, Andrew, too, so we need to be looked after, So I think there's all those things that are happening. So I actually, despite the challenges, I remain pretty optimistic about the opportunity. Now, it's not going to be easy, not going to be straightforward, but if we stay the course, I think we'll get there. Right here.
Thank you. Okay, first question from our audience. Are you influenced much by other countries when it comes to the decisions you make for your boards in Australia?
That's a double-edged sword. I'm not quite sure where that question's come from. But the short answer, do I look globally at what companies in our sector are doing, technology, innovation? Yeah, absolutely. We 2-3 of the company. I mean, I'm on the Vodafone Group board. Ramsay is the biggest private hospital operator in Europe, and Xero's now got its platform, in the UK, Canada, US, and Asia, and South Africa. So yeah, look, we're always looking at best of breed. I mean, in the businesses that I'm involved in, you've got to look at global best practice. You've got to look at global competition. You can't, because we're not localized, and Tyro's the same. Agin is a global player, and we compete with them locally. And so, yeah, very much so. And I think anyone who's involved in business, that's what you got to do, because it's just the way it works. So, yeah.
And how hard is it for a scalable product when you think about those cross-border, different legislation, different other forms of accounting? How easy or difficult is that for a business looking to scale?
Oh, look, there's definitely differences by country, regulation. Yeah, in general, by the way, accounting standards are pretty standard in that sense. But yeah, look, well, Uber faced it, didn't they? I mean, the taxi system is probably one of the most highly regulated industries right across the world, and yet they've sort of persevered. So you do need to have a local go-to-market, strategy. But the trick is to have, your platform dynamics working, and then you tailor it, the UI or the logic layer. And So yeah, you've got to, sometimes you go to market slightly different in a different country, or you're partnering different. For example, in the accounting area, and did Steve Amos come and talk to you? Yeah, yeah. Well, Steve would have. He's far better at it than I am, So, but like the use of accounts in the US is far less than here in Australia and Canada, and so there's sort of bookkeepers and people and very different by state. So you've got to slightly move your go-to-market strategy as well. So, but it's eminently doable, and you've got to have local people on the ground, but you still can run a global technology platform, mostly, in delivering that. That's how you get scale economics.
Innovation seems to be a thing, but shouldn't it permeate all levels of thinking in a business? How do you drive this throughout an organisation, throughout the entire organisation, versus seeing it as a standalone process or something that a team does?
Yeah, well, I really agree. I worry when I see the Department of Innovation, not that they have Department of Innovation, but the innovative team. Innovation, see, I have a very broad definition of innovation. I try to innovate every day. I try to, how I handle my paperwork, I try to find new ways to do things as more efficient or better outcome. I mean, I enjoy that. It's sort of this what used to be called quality circles, or process redesign. But innovation is that constant quest of improvement and betterment, and you want it at every part of the organisation. And let me assure you, just because you might have some title doesn't make you the best innovator. It's actually all the great ideas come from all the people being focused on a common outcome to make a difference. And I mean, that was actually been one thing I remember from Telstra. One of the thing that I used to enjoy the most. We ended up being a reasonably early user of Yammer. It doesn't matter what product it is, but we it was just amazing when you'd put a challenge out there, or you say, hey, I'm thinking about this, and sometimes I do it. What do you think is the right answer? It'd just be this sort of incredible sort of explosion of great ideas, and a lot of the time that's how we sort of put in little innovative processes. But I really agree. Innovation needs to pervade everybody and everything. And yes, you do want some great invention and innovation of product, but you want it as part of the culture of the organisation, this continual learning. That's what makes great organisations, and it makes life more fun too. So, which is important.
Philosophical question from our next viewer. Many of the greatest innovators in history proved to be polymaths, people who take great interest in many different fields and topics. Do you believe it is an essential criteria for innovation?
Well, I think not, but I also do agree. I mean, the people who innovation is discipline. You need mathematical. You need to approach things. I mean, it's like the scientific method. I mean, some of the greatest scientists who invented things, they've worked at things for years and years and years. And then they see it come together. So I think. I think innovation has that broader sense about attitude and culture and approach, but there is no question that the discipline, the rigor, and the smartness of people in pursuing and continuing to look at improvement can make an enormous difference. So I sort of like both, really. Probably I'm sure there'll be someone out there and say, well, David, that's that type of innovation, and this one will be there. But you need both. You can't just rely on a handful of people. I love the scientists at CSIRO. We can't rely on them to be the innovators, or the polymathematicians there. You need this whole. That's why, I suppose, we talk around this, but let's take the Swedes. The Swedes do some great innovation. It's sort of deep in their society, and that's what I think we really need. We need, a country, and we might call it, ingenuity. We might call it something else, but. We want everyone. We want the farmers. We are good innovators. Look at all the things we've developed over the years. We just don't talk about it enough, and we don't celebrate each other enough either we should, anyway.
The next question is from someone you know well, John Ridge. It's a long one.
Oh no, John.
The problem with the current system of JobKeeper is that it's not really encouraging organisations to take on new people, as it only applies to people who are employed as of the 1st of March 2020. We have employed around 10 people since then for whom the JobKeeper doesn't apply. And I think there is an argument that there should be consideration given to a two-tier system after the end of September, one of rural and regional jobs which stays the same, and a different one for urban jobs which might start to decrease slightly. What do you think?
I remember, well, look, I think it's a really good point, John. I mean, so, it just may not be JobKeeper is the right vehicle to use. But John, if you send that to me, I'll send it into Treasury, and because I mean, we do want to create the new jobs, and especially in regional, because they're doing it tough, and I mean, and it's going to take a while for them to come back. So the need is real. I'm just not sure. JobKeeper may not be the right, vessel to do it, because it was all about, existing companies, decline 30% of revenue. And remember, we've got the other problem as well. Some companies had that decline in revenue now are coming back out, and they're still receiving, JobKeeper. So they don't really, well, the need's not as great as it was. So we're trying to manage that so the money's getting to the right people. But in terms of job creation and new people, there may be something else we can do. So, hey, John, just send it through. You've got my email address, so send it through, and I'll talk to the Treasury guys.
Our next question from some of our senior members. Any advice for senior IT workers looking to gain board of directors experience? What do boards look for, and when would someone with an IT background be of interest?
Well, there's no question. The paucity of digital knowledge, and I'll say digital, because I mean it is IT, but is pretty acute in boards, and so yeah, they are looking for good technologists who can also just remember you've got to be able to, technology is a means to an end, not the end in itself. Now, I mean, I do love technology, so I quite like it being an end as well because I just enjoy it. But in a business sense, you're using technology to, process loans faster, whatever it is. So you just need to be able to bring that skill as well. And so, yeah, there's a real need. And so, I mean, more so than, any other skill. I mean, I'm often approached, who do I know who's got digital capability on a board? And so the thing is, you've got to get out there and, make sure that, the headhunters know you're looking for a job. You got to, look to people who, and also don't be afraid just to step out and, go on a few smaller boards to start with, and then it can build from there. But yeah, those are enormous need. And by the way, we need more board members that have real life experience. Yes, there's sort of people who are good at governance, you need them, but you need really, people who've been in line roles, know what it's like to fail, and when you have all those all-nighters trying to fix things and all that, so you're very valuable.
Continuing on the career spectrum, what would be your advice for a young professional member who wants to start their career in the IT industry and might not be sure what skills to acquire?
Well, I think you just got to go out and start talking to people and take a step. I mean, it's a pretty broad question, but look, I mean, we all know the technologies that are, hot at the moment, from AI, data scientists, etc. And the whole area of robotics. Then you can go into sort of the coding area. Just, I would encourage you, go and find something that really you enjoy. Then get in and do a course, and I'll give you, well, just about give you money. I was going to say, I'm not sure I can give you money, but the doors will open up. There's so much opportunity at the moment. Because remember that, you think about it. I mean, I was at Garvin the other day looking at, they're doing this national, genetics database, and there's so much coding and how they're doing it now. they've got so many issues with cyber and privacy and all that stuff. But, that's an enormous bigger IT project. I mean, you know, once you've actually sequenced your DNA, then you've got to store it, you've got to be able to analyze it. So there's just so much opportunity. But it's the same in pharma tech, med tech. So think about it, the technology, how it applies in different industries, because it's all about an outcome for, delivering better prescriptions or better diagnostics of MRI or, whatever it is. So that's what I would do. But I'll give you money, you'll find. And if you really like quantum physics, go and be a quantum physicist, But that's pretty tough, Not sure I even understand all quantum physics,
What about for some of our small business owner members? How would you suggest they accommodate new technologies and promote innovation within a small budget?
Well, make sure your children are in the business. That's what I do. I do worry. The assumption that I'm 66, right? And I'm not a tech, I mean, yes, I've been in the industry a long time, but just because you've got a 6 in you, it doesn't you can still learn this stuff. So first of all, step in, and get help. But the people love teaching you, about it. So I don't think you need to rely. Then there's so many good, if you go to the local chamber or your industry association, they'll have solutions, and they're not that expensive anymore. I mean, you should have digital accounts. I mean, I say that not as Xero, but it just makes life so much easier. I mean, I have my business on this thing, and I can invoice, I can look at what my cash flow is, etc. So it's not that hard, because remember, technology should just make your business better. Should be able to deliver a better service, get access to information, and then look, there's lots of young, family around to help or kids. So that's what I do, but it doesn't need to be expensive, not at all.
Next question is, could you please share a recent innovation strategy you have come across which you found compelling?
Recent innovation strategy that I found compelling. Oh, gee, that would when I say the question's a little bit. I mean, I'm involved in a lot of what I would call innovative thinking, in terms of how we're solving problems. For example, the CSIRO has been involved in the Bushfire Commission, and one of the the travesties in the bushfires, besides the climate change, has been just as we all know, fires do not actually respect state boundaries, and they tend to go over, and yet you got these fireys sort of all working off different systems, and of course so innovation there was, how do you smash them all together, get a common data set so everybody's seeing the same amount of information. So it was really inspiring to see the way a group of scientists and researchers all got together to design a system that didn't need everybody, had to throw everything out the back door, and they just created all these APIs and created this. It was really innovative, really exciting. So that was an example. But remember, innovation, it's like mission-led research. You want to have a challenge. I mean, the best innovation comes when you've got a really clearly defined problem, and then you go after it. If you say, hey, David, Andrew, go and be innovative, well, yawn. So you've got to find a problem that's really gnarly and go after it, and then get all these people working on it to create a great solution. If you do that, that's where I see the best innovation. The same with, I mean, I could think of a whole lot of examples in business where, things that just look too hard, and then you get some smart people room, and like provisioning terminals, or how you do, fund, payables. I mean, there's just so many different examples you can do. Anyway, that's what you do. So great example. Find a really tough problem. That's the way to go.
Thank you. Our final question, just to wrap up and to delve a little bit deeper into what you were just saying there with specific examples. From your point of view, what other industries may be lacking tech innovation in Australia, and which are the ones doing a good job and are the most disruptive?
Oh, gee. Well, look, I mean, I suppose that the challenge you probably got, I mean, as a generic statement, often it's really hard to innovate when you've got big legacy systems. And it's partly cultural, and you're constantly sort of balancing, should I just start again, or do I try to innovate around what I've got in technology? So they're the big industries that you know and love, which is sort of probably, but they're very, by the way, if you work in banking and insurance, I mean, I know how hard it is, or telco's a classic example. It's really hard running a telco. You've got, enormous customer base, too many products. It's really hard, and you're managing all this complexity, and what appears to be simple, you do a little change, it's really hard. So it just holds you back. And then you have sort of fintech, which is sort of where you start with a blank sheet of paper and off you go, and you're agile and make a difference. So I think that that's part of the change. So that the big complex existing industries, the ones that are not doing it as well, but I'm saying it's hard. I don't beat them up too much. I need to help them. The ones that I think is really exciting is I do think health is just such an enormous minefield of, opportunity, or not a minefield. It's just from the health industry is one of the most fragmented, uncoordinated, industries, but it's our lives. So be it, from MRI, hematology, oncology, cardiology, through to healthcare, through to primary healthcare, insurance. It just needs to come together. There's so much innovation in there, and just enormous opportunity. And that goes all the way from, medical research, all the way, even if looking at the work we do with infectious diseases, we've got did all the vaccine testing for the Oxford vaccine down in Geelong, which is CSIRO. I mean, even there, we're now, using technology to connect to these other labs around the world, and it's real time. I mean, that just so much opportunity there. So I think that's one, really, really exciting area. I think so. Yeah, that'd be my answer. Yep.
David, thank you so much. You've been very generous with your time and your insights, and thank you in particular for the work that you're now doing with the NCCC in helping inform Australia's response to the COVID pandemic and now our economic challenges. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Well, thank you, Andrew, and thanks for everything that ACS does. You're a wonderful organisation, and you've kept the professional standards and in our industry high, and it's a great industry. So thank you, and thank you for the work you're doing. It's really great.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks to the ACS members for joining us tonight. Don't forget to tune in next Thursday night, also at 5:30. We'll see you then.